Tell us a story.
Well, my mom was pregnant. She was 42 years old in Yukon, West Virginia. It was real cold back in December of 1930. And it was real cold, snow on the ground. And she went into labor, and Daddy didn't have time to go and get the doctor because he lived so far away. And so he just went ahead and he delivered me. I only weighed 3 pounds when the doctor come up there and did weigh me. But you couldn't get out and go nowhere, and they didn't have any clothes for me. So Granny, my mommy cut a blanket in two and made 4 pieces out of it to tie me up in. And Daddy took rocks and made it like a little incubator in front of the fireplace. And they took turns sitting and watching me so that I'd live till the doctor could get there. And then when the doctor got there, he told him that I wasn't going to live. And he said, "Oh, yes, she is. It's my little girl, my baby." And so they sat like that and watched me for the first 6 weeks of my life. Daddy would go to work, come in, and he would let Mama rest a couple of hours. And then Mama would sit and watch me. And she would sit there till Daddy got up, and he would get ready and go to work, and I'd go through it again. And for 6 long weeks they did like that. My head wasn't closed when I was born either, because the time wasn't up for my brain to go back together like it's supposed to. And so they couldn't leave me. Nobody had to sit there and watch it all the time. And that's the way Mama did until I had a little bit of hair come out on my head. And she said I had a little bit of fingernails come on my fingers, and the doctor told me, said, "Well, she's going to live, I believe." And Daddy would go to work, and he'd get enough money that day to go just to what they called the company store. And he'd get me what we call little bands that went around the stomach to hold the navels in, and 1 little shirt, and maybe 2 little diapers that day. And then he'd go back the next day and work, and then he'd go get me some more till Mama could wash them. And that's the way they raised me until I was 6 months old, and the doctor told him that I was going to make it. I just have to be careful. And I started to grade school 3 times before I started to go because I was sick all the time. But God was good to me, and He let me live, gave me a good mom and daddy. And I'm 83 years old almost today, and here I am still living, and they're both gone. But I still have my memories. I can still remember Mom. Dad liked to drink because that's what they did back in those days. And he was one of the first moonshiners to haul it from what they called Slate Rock, Virginia, back over to Premier and Coretta and Coldwood and Welch. He sold that, but he rode a horse. That's the way they carried. Didn't have cars. And that's the way they did until I was 8 years old when we moved away from Yukon and moved to Premier. And Dad went to work in the mines. And I remember the day we moved there, Daddy and the neighbor was drinking. And Mama looked out to see why Daddy wasn't bringing the furniture in the house. He was sitting up on the dresser singing. And she took out there with the broom. She said, "Jack, what is wrong with you? Are you crazy? Will you get down there and get your furniture in the house?" And him and her got into it. And next thing you know, he was getting the furniture in there, and Mr. Spence helped him, which my sister married Mr. Spence's son later on. And but there was many times like that he'd get carried away drinking that moonshine, and she'd get one winding up after him, and he'd run and run to the neighbor's house. They'd open the doors and let him run through it was black people, and they would open the door. "Come on, Mr. Jack, you're going to have to hurry, because here she comes, Miss Liz's coming with the hatchet." And here she'd run across that through the camping. I mean, around the camp and come back to the house. And they said, Mr. Jack's all right. And Daddy would be hiding from her. Sure did. One time, he come in the kitchen, was running his mouth drinking. She threw a pot of hot jelly on him off the stove, and then threw a pot of coffee grounds in that jelly. Talking about a mess, he was in it.
Oh.
He took that around his mouth, and she said, come on, just come right on. She's a little old bitty thing, and she got that machete and took that after him, and he went back out that road running again. He'd go up and stay till he'd sober up, and she'd forget it, I reckon, and then come back. But there was kids all over the floor because they had so many of us, you know. I can't remember how we all slept because we went to 2 rooms.
Oh.
And I can't remember. We had to sit crossways of the beds.
How many of y'all was it?
Huh?
How many of y'all was it?
At that time when this happened, I guess it was me and Daddy had Pauline, my sister, and my brother George. But then later on, they wound up. There was 9 of us. Now you tell me how we all slept, because I don't know.
In a 2-room.
I cannot fathom. But of course, I was little, so I probably had to sleep with Mom and Daddy, or they could make me a pallet anymore because I was little. But there was pallets made all over the floor, and there wasn't nobody said nothing. The big ones got the little ones and put them in there and slept with them, and watched after them. And that was just the way it was done. You know, and when everybody took a bath, they set the tub down there. Mama would in the morning, and by the time you come in from work or wherever it was or school, the water was hot. Would sit there in the sun all day. And then Mama would bathe me first. And then all the rest of them would take turns bathing in that same water because we had to carry from about as far as from here over to about halfway down to where the bridge is.
Oh.
Drinking water, every kind of water we used anything for, we had to carry. And I carried had little 4-pound lard buckets. That's what I carried mine in. We carried water to drink and everything in it.
How old were you when you had your first in-house working toilet? Because y'all had outhouses, right, when you were young?
I was 8 years old.
Wow. We
didn't have a refrigerator, and we had lights that hung down from the ceiling, just a light bulb. And we went to the outside toilets. We had a fire burning grate, and if you had the money, you had a stove. But a lot of people didn't have them. They cooked on a grate. But you never hear nobody complain, because everybody had the same thing.
Right, it didn't matter.
What was it like up there? Because it's such a poor community anyway, like during the Depression and stuff.
Well, see, I was born right at the end of the Depression. When we came to Premier, I was still young, and but the people still wasn't out of it. They were just coming out of it. And you was lucky if you had, Lord, we didn't have macaroni until after World War II.
Really?
We didn't know nothing about that. Or sliced meat like that. Didn't have nothing like that. Bread, loaf bread. Didn't have no loaf bread. You had to
whatever you could afford to bake.
Make your bread your own self. And I took biscuits to school. Only did too. And when we moved to Premier, we got acquainted with the kids, the Italian girls and boys. Their parents would make bread. They knew what it was, loaf bread. And they'd make their sandwiches on that bread. Well, they'd come to school and they wanted to trade us our biscuits for that bread, that sandwich, because they thought it was so different. And they'd come, I always took an onion on my biscuit and take it to school. That's what they liked. And I liked it too. Mustard and an onion.
Mustard. I eat my sandwiches like you eat.
And that's what we trade on. That's the way we learned about bread. And then it started coming in the store back after World War II.
Wow.
It was right before the World War II. I can't remember. That homemade bread come out. I believe worked in one of the first bakeries we had in Welch.
What's the biggest life-changing thing, like the biggest thing for you? Like just through the years of your life, like what, an invention or change in government, or like what's the biggest thing for you that was a shocker?
The morals of the people. It hurts my heart to see them. They're just deteriorating all over the world, not just in our locale, but all over the world. They've forgotten all about God and don't want to know nothing about Him. And when they're old, or when the Lord comes or calls them, they'll be lost. And they don't know what that means until they face it. Neither do I. I wish I was able to tell the whole world about God, but they wouldn't listen.